Il y a 2 ans, en 2015, l'ULB a inauguré sa Maison des Sciences Humaines, la MSH, une nouvelle structure d'accueil et de soutien pour la recherche en sciences humaines et sociales. Pensée au-delà du découpage de l'université en facultés et en disciplines, la MSH a permis à de nouvelles structures interdisciplinaires, de nouvelles équipes interdisciplinaires, de voir le jour autour d'objets d'études ou de questions de recherche. En 2015, naissaient ainsi les 3 premières équipes de la Maison des sciences humaines de l'ULB, l'Observatoire des mondes arabes et musulmans, OMAM, la structure de recherche interdisciplinaire sur le genre, l'égalité et la sexualité, STRIGE, et le laboratoire interdisciplinaire en études urbaines, le LIEU. Un an plus tard, l'unité de recherche dédiée à l'étude de l'Asie orientale, IST, les rejoignait au sein de la MSH, et puis en 2017, Americas, le centre d'études des Amériques, inauguré il y a une dizaine de jours. L'intégration de ces 5 équipes, auxquelles s'ajoutent 5 équipes affiliées, qui couvrent des champs comme la théorie politique ou les études des religions et de la laïcité, confirme que la MSH de l'ULB a répondu à des besoins de la recherche interdisciplinaire et interfacultaire. Elle démontre également la vitalité des sciences humaines et sociales dans notre université. Les champs couverts par ces équipes témoignent aussi de l'importance de soutenir des recherches qui sont axées sur des objets ou des problèmes qui mobilisent plusieurs disciplines, plusieurs approches, plusieurs méthodologies, au bénéfice de la connaissance et de la réflexion. Et enfin, les questions abordées dans les travaux de ces équipes renforcent le lien entre la recherche universitaire et les débats qui animent aujourd'hui la société. Ce développement progressif de la Maison des sciences humaines nous a conduit à nous interroger sur notre propre identité scientifique collective. Et au-delà de la question de la méthode et des écueils propres à l'interdisciplinarité, il nous a semblé intéressant de questionner l'humain comme objet de recherche et d'interroger de façon plus critique sa réalité ontologique supposée. Où commence et termine l'humain? Par quelle tension et séparation l'humanité est-elle habitée? Comment ces frontières permettent-elles de définir l'humain et ses diverses identités? Et bien sûr, quel rôle jouent les disciplines scientifiques elles-mêmes dans le partage de l'humain. C'est la raison pour laquelle les frontières de l'humanité, frontières que nous supposons poreuses et fluides, ont été retenues comme thème de cette année académique à la MSH. Ce thème nous invite à interroger de nouvelles pratiques et de nouvelles représentations qui émergent notamment à partir des développements technoscientifiques et médicaux, à partir des découvertes paléontologiques ou archéologiques, mais aussi des crises humanitaires et migratoires, des nouvelles pensées philosophiques, sociales et anthropologiques, de l'urgence des questions écologiques ou encore de l'évolution des droits humains. Pour autant, bien sûr, à la MSH, nous ne nous transformons pas tous en spécialistes de ces questions, mais nous envisageons ce thème comme un thème de travail, de réflexion au long cours et peut-être pour plusieurs années. Nous avons pour cela réuni un comité scientifique au sein de la MSH, dont certains membres sont là et je les salue, et mobilisé les professeurs invités de la Maison des sciences humaines de l'ULB. Ils seront 31 cette année, leur visage s'affiche derrière moi, et plusieurs d'entre eux et d'entre elles nourriront les travaux de la MSH sur l'humain et sur ses frontières. Vous l'aurez compris, en 2017-2018, divers événements seront en effet organisés à la MSH sous le signe de cette thématique, à commencer bien sûr par la soirée qui nous réunit ce soir et dont Vincent Chapeau, qui est logisticien de recherche à la MSH, vous parlera dans un instant. Une petite dizaine de conférences interrogeront les frontières de l'humain, aussi bien les frontières qui partagent l'humanité que celles qui distinguent l'humain et son autre. 2 journées d'études ont également été programmées, ainsi qu'un ciné-club qui sera consacré plus spécifiquement au cinéma de science-fiction. Avant donc de leur laisser la parole et de laisser surtout la parole à nos invités du jour qui, à leur façon, évoqueront l'humain et ses frontières, je profite du micro que j'ai dans la main pour remercier tout d'abord notre collègue Julien Piret qui sera aux manettes tout à l'heure pour vous offrir un cocktail aux frontières de l'humain. Mais je voudrais aussi et surtout remercier Maïté Boscart et Vincent Chapeau pour le travail remarquable qu'ils fournissent au quotidien à la MSH, pour le soutien précieux qu'ils apportent à la direction et aux équipes de la MSH, et puis surtout pour l'énergie vitale qu'ils ont déployée pour l'organisation de cette année thématique et de cette soirée en particulier. Je vous demande s'il vous plaît de les applaudir et je cède la parole à Vincent.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you to you all for being here tonight. I'm also going to thank Renaud, who's making the sound. Without him, you wouldn't hearing me, so thank you, Renaud. Before I forget, can I ask you to turn off your cell phones, because we just, for obvious reasons of conviviality, but also we're going to be recording the session tonight, so we don't have any ringing in the middle. My role is very simple. I'm going to explain to you how the evening will unfold, and then I'm going to introduce the three, let's call them performers of tonight, Rosi Braidotti, Martin Daniel, and AI Duet, the artificial intelligence who's going to be joining us later on. So let's start with this evening program. First, we'll have Rosi Braidotti. She will give a lecture called The Future of the Posthumanities for about 45 minutes to an hour, after which we're going to have a Q&A session, so prepare your questions if you have some for around 15 to 20 minutes. And then I'll briefly come back to introduce Martin Daniel and AI Duet, and they will have a musical interaction for about 20 minutes as well. After the performance, we can take one or two questions, but the idea is really to move the dialogue and the questions you still might have to the lobby where the drink awaits us. So that leaves me with one simple task to introduce Rosi Braidotti. So I could do the classical reading of her resume, but it's on Wikipedia, and underline her many accomplishments, her graduation from the Australian National University, her doctorate at La Sorbonne, or how she was appointed as the founding professor in women's studies at the University of Utrecht in 1988. I could emphasize how Nomadic Subject is a landmark book in contemporary feminist theory, or underline the importance of her 2013 book. Perhaps that's me, actually. No, it's turned off. Underline the importance of the 2013 book, The Posthuman, that we're going to be partly discussing tonight. But many of you are already familiar with Rosi Braidotti's work, and you can be also reading everything online. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you what it's not online, and why we invited Rosi Braidotti. So 3 reasons. First, we, as a group of researchers, needed somebody to help us think about the current shifts in the human condition, but someone that wouldn't be trapped in the contemporary discourses that are usually either almost messianic about posthumanism or totally fear-driven. We needed somebody with a critical approach, not only of posthumanity itself as a reality, but as a discourse as well, and we knew that Rosi Braidotti's work was one of the most powerful in that regard. Second reason, we needed a generous voice as well. What do I mean by that? I mean someone who could be highly conscious that these shifts in human condition occur in the real world, in a material world where dominations do exist, and where sometimes people are actually crushed by what others might call the progress. So this attention to those important values, we knew we could find them in Rosi Braidotti's work, and that is the second reason why we invited her. And finally, we needed a bit of hope and joy. And last time I heard Rosi Braidotti, she quoted the Russian feminist Emma Goldman. The quote goes as follows: "If I can't dance, then I don't want to be part of your revolution." So it seems to me that the fact that she quotes her proves that Rosi Braidotti knows that critical thinking is not always a depressing one. So for all these reasons, we really wanted to invite her to open this year, and we are delighted that she accepted. So please help me welcome her to the floor. Thank you very much.
I hope you have everything you need.
Fantastic. How very kind. Thank you. Oops, I've already destroyed the microphone. Very good. Merci infiniment de cette invitation. Je dis quelque chose quand même un petit peu en français rapidement, en bonne sorbonnarde que je suis toujours dans mon cœur. La conférence sera en anglais. Merci de cette invitation, merci de cette présentation, introduction tellement généreuse, et merci d'avoir choisi l'humain, le post-humain comme thématique principale. C'est le grand problème d'aujourd'hui, donc je me réjouis d'être ici. Et pour la séance questions, etc., soyez libres de parler en français, italien, néerlandais, anglais et latin. Jusqu'à là, j'arrive. Après, c'est fini. So now I switch languages because the lecture has been taught in this pseudo-world language. I remain a student of Foucault, and I do think that as one grows older, the love for our teachers shows through. And so in thinking about the human posthuman, the boundaries of the human, I ended up doing a discourse analysis, looking at what is being produced in our field, going out and checking what the scholarship is producing. And now how that differs from marketing of ideas is already a question. You may know that the class of people that used to be called the intellectuals have undergone a number of mutations in the last 20 years. In the 1990s, we became content providers. I remember when that definition came, Laurie Anderson actually even has a song about this, content providers. Then, of course, internet took over, and that is the total and absolute content providers. So by the millennial, intellectuals were quite simply ideas brokers. And if you are a leading idea brokers, you are an idea leaders. And I've been invited to a couple of conferences in my position as an idea broker and an idea leader. And quite frankly, I would like to cry. I remember when we were teachers and intellectuals. So sort of noticing the change, going out to study what's happening, reading what is happening in the field, brought me face to face with the posthuman. I hope this thing works. Somebody has made it very beautiful. It used to be a very dowdy academic PowerPoint. I define the posthuman not as a dystopian science fictional idea, but as a marker of our historicity. It is a convergence phenomenon, the convergence between posthumanism on the one hand and post-anthropocentrism on the other. The former criticizes the idea of man as the measure of all things, the universal standards, whereas the second one objects to species hierarchy. Posthumanism and post-anthropocentrism have different genealogies. They come from different places. You can really look at a thinker like Nietzsche and obviously see the roots of the critiques of humanism. There are sort of some elements of the critique of anthropocentrism, but not necessarily. My teachers, Foucault, great critic of humanism, they leave anthropocentrism firmly in place. So the convergence between the critique of the universalist ideal of man and the critique of species hierarchy, that critique is the convergent phenomenon that is redefining the field. For a Derridian, I'm thinking of the work of Derrida himself, of Carrie Wolf. If you critique humanism, it follows that you critique anthropocentrism. This is not actually verifiable in the scholarship. If you look at what is being produced, critique of humanism comes from philosophy, from anthropology, gender, postcolonial theory. Critique of anthropocentrism is pretty much science and technology studies. It's very different discursive domains. So I would question this inevitability that if you critique humanism, you critique anthropocentrism. I would go even further. I would say that as people of the humanities, we don't even have a language to think of ourselves as a species. Of the four horsemen of the apocalypse of modernity, Marx, Freud, Nietzsche, and Darwin, we have had ample Marx and ample Freud. We've had Nietzsche through our post-structuralist generation in France. There is no Darwin. Darwin does not pertain to the field of the humanities. We do not think of ourselves as a species. If you are in the humanities, you are not trained to ask the question, what is the human in the humanities? Or rather, there is a universal consensus that it is about him. That's the human. The Vitruvian ideal of man as the universal standard of things, universal for all places and all times and all classes and all ethnicities and all genders. The famous hymn, the hymn that has been both elevated to a universal standard and criticized as such. How do we readjust our way of thinking and producing knowledge, going from him to this other hymn that we are involved with now? How do we negotiate that transition? This is not going to work. I don't think I'm going to fall over. I think somewhere between these two moments, it doesn't want to go back, good, it does, between what we are accustomed to taking as the standard and what is happening to us, I think within that field, a number of new discourses are emerging. And what I would like to try to do tonight is show you, give you an example of the kind of discourses that are coming up. And then we can compare it to what the Université Libre de Bruxelles is doing and maybe come to a discussion point. And between this, the tranquility of what we are familiar with, and the shock of the new, there is a whole emotional range that is developing, going from the apocalyptic fear that has gripped so many, from Jürgen Habermas to His Holiness Pope Francis, and sort of apocalyptic monotheism, fearing the fear of the human, to Naomi Klein and the humanist socialist left, worried about what is happening to us, to the total excitement of corporate-driven transhumanism, celebrating the dawn of a new era. In between these two extremes, all kinds of emotional responses are very much part of our landscape. We have just put to press a Posthuman glossary that has about 102 short entries and about 93 contributors. And the emotional register goes from eco-horror to trans-euphoria, to wanting to cry at the memory of what the countryside looked like when you were a kid, to the total visions of smart cities of the future where everything would be interactive and nobody would be poor or old or badly dressed. And I think that techno-utopia on the one hand and the eco-nostalgia on the others are almost sort of markers of the very complex affectivity that goes around the things. Now, let's get rid of one issue immediately, and that issue is the Anthropocene. There is a lot of Anthropocene literature, a lot of Anthropocene scholarship. The climate change debate and the idea that this is now the ecological era, the geological era where the human leaves a fatal mark on the crust of the earth is very dominant, but it should not take over the discussion. I prefer to take a broader look and say, yes, climate change, of course, immense issue. Even Prince Charles, especially Prince Charles, is worried about it, has to be true. But next to it, of course, the real problems, as far as I'm concerned, the polarization of resources, and the selection in terms of access. We're talking about these incredible developments and this evolution of our species, and we do forget that 1/3 of households on Earth don't even have electricity. So can we keep the two things in some sort of balance? I think we need to reintroduce the old 19th century almost language of social justice in a 21st century landscape of evolution, transformation, mutation. And the Anthropocene alone, however popular it may be, does not guarantee that we cover the full spectrum. Besides, in what I call the accelerationist logic of knowledge production in advanced capitalism, the Anthropocene has entered the anthropomeme and has gone into a spin. And you are getting a set of variations around the theme, going from the Cthulhucene, if you can pronounce it, the Capitalocene, the Anthropocene, the plantation scene, the Misanthropocene, and the list is open, and it continues on growing as I speak. I didn't make this up. I wish I had. They're very witty. These are real events, real books, websites, programs happening in the real world. They come with a bibliography. This type of empiricism, that is to say, making arguments using discourse as the empirical material, is what I learned from my teachers, from the post-structuralists. It's discourse as the material embedding of social, affective, collective phenomenon. I do wish I had made this up, but I did not. There is another lecture to be done, and I can't do it tonight, on the specific accelerationist logic of discourse. Language has gone into a spin, and I'll give you some more examples now when we start looking at what is happening to what used to be les sciences humaines, what is happening to them at the conceptual and terminological level. In reading this epistemic accelerationism, I rely almost completely on Deleuze and Guattari, Mille Plateaux, the reading of capitalism as schizophrenia, as a system that accelerates, overcodes, and erodes its own foundations. And that accelerationist logic has enormous effect on the production of subjectivity, on who we are as the subjects of knowledge. What does it mean to produce knowledge in a world constructed by Capitalocene, Plasticene, Anthropocene? Who are we, the subjects that are trying to produce knowledge in such a context? As university people, as researchers, as thinking citizens, we are the knowing subjects. And these knowing subjects have to deal with challenges that go from this exuberant, incredible, intelligent production to the devastation of a planet that is crying out for help. Between the fourth industrial revolution and the sixth extinction, the posthuman subject of knowledge is trying to emerge. And I think that has enormous consequences for the type of sciences humaines et posthumaines that we are going to be doing together. So with these premises in mind, then I've been through several stages. First, I did the book that by now is old. Books age very quickly these days. I went out to see what has happened to what used to be the human sciences, the humanities. And what you will find in the field is a joyful, vital exuberance. We have new emanations, for instance, the ecological humanities, the environmental humanities, and the environmental humanities break down into two: the blue humanities if you study oceans, and the green humanities if you study the earth. All of the Australian environmental humanities are basically about the barrier reef, so they are blue. And I'm not making any of this up. Again, I wish I had this creativity. These are programs. If you Google them, you will find the environmental humanities are massive. They have degree courses, they have websites, they have a world federation, they have a whole structure. And there's no self-respecting research university that does not have a thing called the environmental humanities or the ecological humanities or sustainable humanities. And then interactive humanities, interacting with what? Really good question. Organic humanities, greater than what? Nobody really knows. Medical humanities, huge. There's no university hospital across the north of Europe that does not have medical, biohumanities, neuroevolutionary humanities, translational humanities, again, what that could possibly mean, community humanities, resilient, public, civic. And you will find already meta-discourses about what I call the posthumanities. Posthumanities coined by Carrie Wolf in 2010, inhuman humanities, Gross 2011, digital humanities, by now a classic. Digital humanities are really faculties within the faculties. Catherine Hales already, before the millennium, Duke University, one of the best digital humanities programs in the world, transformative humanities, nomadic humanities. Now, why didn't I think of that one? Kate Stimpson thought of it, 2016, brilliant, of course, and out of, I think it's Leuven, adjectival humanities with wit and irony by Erwin de Graaf. So already meta-discourses about the explosion of knowledge in what I call the critical posthumanities. And if you look at the meta-discourses, then my brand of posthumanism would be in dialogue with these sort of critical schools. What are the features? What have we got here? And what is happening, you may want to say. What are the features of these posthumanities? Well, the first thing, if we take, let's say, the big players, environmental humanities and digital humanities, the first thing about them is that they claim that they are the real humanities. They are the real thing. They are the humanities in the 21st century. Where this leaves the other humanities, history, philosophy, literature, the languages, anthropology, you never know where they are. They're the cookie cutters. They go everywhere. But let's say the classical humanities, where they are left in this, is completely unclear. So what are they? And in institutions like gender studies and post-colonial studies, what do we do with the studies which are not quite disciplines but have been so active as motors of knowledge production in the last 30 years? But the claim of the digital and environmental humanities is they are absolutely the true new humanities, and they are socially relevant. They are related to concrete big issues in the world, the Anthropocene, the climate change, the informational revolution. They are intrinsically socially relevant in a way that only gender studies could maybe say we are intrinsically socially relevant, but the Catholic Church would even disagree with that. Certainly, the classical humanities have to prove to the world that they are socially relevant, not the new humanities. They are right in there. They are not in the discourse of the crisis. They are in the discourse of vitality, dynamism. These are the winners. There's no crisis here. We are the future. There's optimism, and there is enormous amount of funding. If you look at the budgets of environmental and digital humanities for research, and you compare it to the budget of the classical humanities, you would want to cry, or you would need a gin and tonic, which is one of my favorite responses to advanced capitalism. This proliferation of discourses, whether you take the actual list of the humanities or even the meta-discourses about them, is not a form of fragmentation. Here we really have to stop for a moment and rewind a little bit the tape. It would be intellectually lazy to see this as a late, sort of delayed effect of postmodern relativism. And you will find this in the literature. In fact, you will find postmodernism coming back in the current discussions, since the whole debate about post-truth. There has been quite a bit of literature coming out post-truth. It's because it's the fault of Derrida, Deleuze, and the postmodernists. They started this, and now Trump is completing the deconstruction of the Enlightenment truth. So sometimes I think just as well that we have postmodernism, because we can scapegoat everything on it. If we didn't have it, we would have to reinvent it. In other words, in the discussion about the posthuman, there is a return of some aspects of the debate on the postmodern for those of you who were alive, well, and vaccinated in those days. And the posthuman arouses the same irritation and sometimes the same violent abuse as postmodern relativism used to. It's a very interesting emotional response. But I think it has really, what is happening has nothing to do with a fragmentation or a breakdown. There is no residual deconstruction here. It's an incredible proliferation, an explosion of discourses. And these discourses are not self-generated. The critical posthumanities are there because there are communities of scholars, of activists, of citizens who are actually making them happen. There is investments of energy, of intelligence, of imagination. The posthumanity, c'est nous. It is our investment. And you may want to say that if we look at it in these terms, the posthuman and posthuman subject of knowledge are not at all an expression of decline or contempt for humanity. It's quite the opposite. We have here a sense of an enormous vitality and the human's ability to reinvent ourselves, also in dire circumstances. So what are the premises then, conceptually? I will turn to my philosophy, which is materialist, vitalist, embedded, embodied, relational, feminist, feminist differential materialism, read with Deleuze and a lot of feminist and anti-racist theory. We need Spinoza to make sense of what is happening to us. We need to move out of the dialectics, out of Hegelian oppositions, and enter a vitalist self-organizing universe, a universe that states that we are all made of the same matter, a common matter, and that we, the subject of the enunciation, is not only human, it is a mixture of human and non-human. The subject of knowledge is neither homo universalis nor anthropos alone, but a more complex, embedded in a non-unitary, relational and affective. Agencement, my teacher Deleuze would say, it's an assemblage. You can enter this discussion if Deleuze doesn't speak to you through Whitehead. You can enter it through process ontologies. You can enter it through Dewey and the American pragmatist. You can enter it through contemporary sciences. You can do it with Damasio, and which is the soft edge of neurosciences. Damasio that talks about Descartes' era and looking for Spinoza. You can enter through, of course, biogenetics. For anybody working in the life sciences, to say we are made of the same matter is like, oh, please tell me something new, as if we didn't know that. It's in the humanities that the question of being of a common matter with non-humans becomes an issue. In other words, we have a problem here of entrenched anthropocentrism in the classical humanities. And if that is written into the conceptual structure of the humanities, how are we going to cope with what is happening to us? How are we going to cope with the diversity of life as a human and non-human continuum, the Zoe geotechno mediated idea of life, which I find in Spinoza, in Deleuze. People call it contemporary naturalism, neo-naturalism, and of course, all horror breaks loose, the idea of naturalism, all the horrors of fascism and determinism return. And yet, if you enter this discussion through the contemporary scientific world, but also if you enter the discussion from this particular image, if I can go back to it, from here, we are in this together. And the we in question is humans and garbage and plastic and water and development and globalization and economics and. What I want to suggest is that a philosophy that allows us to think in terms of and are process ontology philosophies, and that we do have them in our repertoire. We just are not particularly used to working with them. Social constructivism has been our methodology for so very long that actually emerging from it is a challenge. Then the challenge is I think the challenge that I have known all my life, we need to learn to think differently about what we're in the process of becoming. Learning to think differently means that the objects of inquiry can no longer be just men or anthropos. The object of inquiry has to be this sequence, a we that includes planetary, social, environmental, artificial, technological, artifact. It's a chain, it's an assemblage. And if we live this way, surely we must be able to think this way. And if we continue to live in ways that we cannot represent theoretically to ourselves, then we have a problem. It's a problem of literacy. It's a problem of translation. It's a problem of maybe relationality. It's a problem of habits, I think Deleuze would say, to defamiliarize ourselves from habit of thinking is, I think, what the posthuman condition calls for. Defamiliarize, say goodbye to what we hold dear and near. Him, the Vitruvian ideals that I visualized at the start. Say goodbye to that, to move towards a new landscape of knowledge. I believe that defamiliarization is a fantastic pedagogical tool. And if you've done any work on race, on ethnicity, on gender, feminist issue, LGBT issues, you will know that there's a whole sector of population, there are all types of human beings that have never felt 100% human. When did women become human? Catherine McKinnon, in her book from about 10 years ago, Are Women Human? Are we human according to Aristotle? Are we even human according to Linnaeus? Are blacks human according to Linnaeus? In Linnaeus' classification of human beings, the animals begin with the African. It's in the taxonomy that the great Linnaeus has produced for us. The human is not a neutral category, never has been. It is a category that indexes access to power. And there are entire sectors of the population that don't count as human. For those people, defamiliarization is an obvious way to function. You take a distance from the categories because they are negotiable. They are not to be taken for granted. So maybe the big crisis of the posthuman is a crisis because it touches the heart of masculinity, the heart of Eurocentrism, the heart of whiteness, the heart of very well-off societies that all of a sudden have to confront the unimaginable possibility of extinction, of crisis, that the world may go on and they may not survive it. It's a crisis of what Deleuze would call the majoritarian subject. And I think in that respect, a very healthy, a very productive crisis. Crises need not be fatal and lethal. They can be generative and productive. And to be slightly hurt, to be slightly wounded. Certainly, when Deleuze theorizes la petite santé, he's talking about to be a little bit wounded is the beginning of wisdom. You join the masses of people who don't feel self-entitled. That slight crack in the surface is the beginning of critical thinking. So in that respect, then, it's a becoming world of subjects of knowledge, and the world is not human, and there is a lot of thinking happening in the world, because the world out there for us, contrary to Spinoza maybe, is not only the animal world, is not only Zoe, it is not only the geological earth world that Nietzsche dealt with so brilliantly, it is also technologically mediated. And I think it is technological mediation that doubled the doses of thinking as being part of the world. It thinks in the world. Objects, the Internet of Things, objects are doing an amazing amount of thinking. Our computational networks, those who run our economy, our defense systems, are doing a great deal of thinking. Okay, you can say we've programmed them and we are in charge. Well, are we really? We do know that our brains, the speed of perception of our brains is slower than the speed of production of knowledge of the computational network. This problem of the slight slowness of our brain in relation to the speed of the computational network is what worries a group of posthuman thinkers that call themselves the transhumanists. And the transhumanists are congregated as an academic community in Oxford. And being Oxford, they go for the killing, they don't mess around. They have created an institute called the Institute for the Future of Humanity. We think big. Nick Bostrom, a very brilliant man, a maths and physics guy, is the director. ERC grants, an incredible brain. The program of the transhumanist is built on this negative analysis of the slowness of our brains. Because the brain is so slow, it's only a question of seconds, but fatal, the answer is we need to accelerate. And the acceleration is through human enhancement. And transhumanism is the branch of posthuman knowledge that really wants to do human enhancement through interfaces between the brain, the computational networks, with the help of clinical psychology, analytic philosophy, the inevitable bioethics Kantian committee, and some philosophy of mind. Go and Google it. It's a massive program. It's a program that is producing postdocs, and they've got a whole posthumanism sector in it, and it's Oxford. We're not talking about Ohio Country College. Massive. The message couldn't be clear. The research program is called superintelligence. I think that this institutional answer represents everything that worries me as a critical posthumanist about the situation. We have the analysis of a deficit. The human is falling behind the very computational network that we have created. So there's a posthuman analysis. The answer to it is enhancement, which is a massive manipulation, very selective. There are millions of social questions here, who gets selected for enhancement, but even leaving the social angle out, the answer is enhancement. And when questioned about this, Bostrom defends fully, passionately, classical rationalism. He defends the 18th century ideal of the perfectibility of the human through science and technology. He defends Vitruvius. He goes back to the Vitruvian ideal. I call this mixture analytic posthumanism and normative neo-humanism the dominant equation in posthuman discourse today. If you're looking for grants, this is the equation you need to write in your grants. You analyze the situation and you bring back the 18th century. The answer has to be neo-humanism because everything else is too scary. It's too experimental. We don't want to trust different ethical forms. This is where the Spinoza's intervention comes, and I would say, let's be coherent. It's not a question of new wines in old bottles. We need to raise to the challenge and develop posthuman ethics that are worthy of our times. If it is the case that we have such huge technological means, let's use them to experiment what kind of subjects we are capable of becoming. We do not know what bodies can do, especially when bodies are imbrained, which is the Spinoza's equation, embrainment of the body, embodiment of the brain, one meta, intelligent, self-organizing, one, and secondly, those bodies are technologically mediated, capable of virtual distribution, virtual outreach. I mean, any one of you out there with laptops and tablets, you have more intelligence at your fingertips than the Allied had when they landed in Normandy. The power of the outreach of that technology is extraordinary. And I think Spinoza is very great here because Spinoza, although he was always saluted as a naturalist, but he was a technician. He wasn't an academic. He lived as a technician. He polished lenses. And I have this fantasy that if he lived today, Spinoza would be a hacker, a computer programmer. He made things. He made optical objects. And in his philosophy, there is no ontological difference between entities that are born and entities that are made. Because the problem in Spinoza's philosophy is neither causality nor origin. The problem is forces. And an object is, an entity is, the forces that that entity is capable of mobilizing in terms of affects and being affected. So there is here an ontological equality between a tablet, an iPad, a carrot, a chicken, and human. We are variations on one matter. And I think if we have that definition of the vitality of meta to restrict the program of human enhancement to a narrow neo-Cartesian understanding of the brain in the mode of the Oxford transhumanists means closing the very door that you have half opened. It is very much, I think, a risky and scientifically flawed operation as far as I'm concerned. This is the moment to open up and experiment with what we're capable of becoming. We being a little bit more than a bunch of analytic philosophers gathered in Oxford, much as I respect and love them, many of them being my teachers. I want to give you an example of this by going back to the pillars of the critical posthumanity, the digital and the environmental. We could look at them. How do we assess them? How do we make sense of what they are producing as knowledge? The premises I want to work with are that, what I already said, the human is not a neutral term, and we need to add, and it's not an easy one to add, the cognitive character of advanced capitalism. This is always a very sore point. But to say, which was the opening statement of my talk, that there is so much knowledge being produced everywhere. Foucault 101. There is more discourse produced than science. Science is a system of classifying and, in a sense, kind of certifying knowledge. There's always more discourse than science, more knowledge than what gains the status of science. Deleuze goes further with this when he talks about the difference between royal science that gets all the grants and nomad science that usually does not get the grants. It's two modalities, not binary, but they are two ways of going about the production of knowledge. Another way of saying this is that advanced capitalism has mutated into, obviously, a knowledge economy. It's cognitive. The production of knowledge is coextensive with what we used to call civil society. In fact, if you look at IT, if you look at biomedical technologies, if you look at, we were talking about fashion, wearable fashions, if you're looking at a great deal of the creative industry, almost all of that research is generated outside the university, or in cooperation with. And to simply say this is a corporate invasion of academic freedom is to really hold a James Corbyn, sort of Bernie Sanders-like 19th century socialist discourse that I think does not do justice to what has happened to knowledge-driven information societies. Here we really would need a seminar on Deleuze and Guattari's analysis of capitalism as the system that generates its own codes and overcodes. A system that markets and capitalizes on all that lives. The capital today is the codes. It's the informational data, biogenetic codes, and of course, algorithmic codes, the double mediation. And when I talk about cognitive capitalism along these lines, I'm not talking about something that is happening out in Mars or something that is external to us. I want to say exactly the opposite, that we are the agents of cognitive capitalism. We, all the more so, as we are university people, people of science and scholarship. And how could we not be excited about what is happening in this current industrial scientific revolution? We're living through extraordinary times, times that are allowing us to push the boundaries of thinkability, not only about the boundaries of the human, but about how we define our interconnection to a multitude of agents. And on top of it, allows us to do so through intense technological mediations. How could we not praise our universities, which are major factors of advanced capitalism, for the capital of knowledge and intelligence that they are generating? It would be hypocritical, apart from being sort of slightly self-defeating. At the same time, and here we start again, there is the range of the emotional reactions to this troublesome shaking up of the boundaries of the human. And my concrete empirical experiment for this is to remind you that the University of Maastricht, I don't want to be Dutch nationalist or anything, but in 2013 pioneered the first synthetic meat. The synthetic hamburger was officially made, the combination of scientists, but it was a couple of years ago, and it is really it's synthetic biology. There's some stem cell at the start, of course, always, but the rest is meat, meat emancipated from the bound organism of an animal. Now, if I were vegan or vegetarian, which I'm not, the idea that we can make meat in the laboratory, the proteins are there, we can't taste it yet because our brain is not wired, but leave it to Nick Bostrom, that's going to come, and we will be able to taste it. But this idea should make us celebrate, right? Shouldn't we be happy that this is happening? So why do you look so sad and disgusted? And every time I talk about synthetic meat, people go, ugh, ugh, like, ugh. What do we miss? What do you miss when meat emancipates itself from the bound organism of a metaphysical entity that we have developed through centuries of cohabitation, a relationship to that entity being the animal? What are we missing when this? Because this is the moment where the defamiliarization enters the discussion. And somehow, however vegan and vegetarian we may be, somehow the idea that meat is made in laboratories, yeah. And I think this is the other side of the euphoria. And I don't know whether the term is eco-nostalgia, fear, or quite simple confusion, but I think we need to hold the two in balance. So the cognitive character of capitalism adds the dimension that we need to be able to tell the difference between the knowledge production that is indexed on the profit motive and the knowledge production that is gratuitously open to experimenting with the intensities of what we're capable of becoming. And I think this critical Spinozism here, read with the French materialist philosophy, really helps us. But we also need feminism and race theories and post-colonial theories to keep in mind the idea that the human is not neutral. Keeping the question of the posthuman open is the issue, not shutting that door too soon. Let's stay then with the two ideas that the human is not neutral, you know this, and the cognitive capitalism, to summarize what I just said, capital today being the informational power of living matter itself, immanent qualities and self-organizing capacity, profit generated from the scientific and economic comprehension of all that lives. Biocapital, life as surplus, the politics of life, biopiracy. I think Vandana Shiva put it in beautifully already way back in the 90s. And I think to look at how these elements allow us to structure the situation, let's go to what used to be our agriculture. Remember agriculture? Well, this is how we grow our food. The greenhouses that look like moon stations. But we also know that the people who gather the produce of our greenhouses are mostly unregistered and unwanted individuals that migrate from one place to the other, doing the work that nobody else wants to do. We call it an emergency crisis when it comes to the refugees. We need them, but we would prefer not to have them. We go through gestures, mostly rhetorical, of great hospitality. We're shutting down our borders, and we are located in a world between the absolute surreal, advanced phase of agrobusiness, which is biotech galore, and the most archaic element of contemporary slavery and denial of basic human rights. So when we're confronted with this, we need to understand that we are as agents of knowledge, participants of both. In other words, we need to live with incredibly painful contradictions and resist the temptation to resolve them. I think it's very difficult to resolve the paradoxes of an era. I think the best that we can do is echo them, accept them, deal with them. How to deal with the schizoid paradoxes of our time in the language of linearity and objectivity, which is the language that we still call the language of science, is one of the issues at stake in the posthumanities. We really need to learn to think differently. Non-linearity, schizoid loops. Is it a coincidence that so many of us scientists read poetry or song lyrics, that literature plays such a role in our attempts to think about the contradictions of today? Where does the inspiration come from? Is that not historically and traditionally what the humanities have always done? People say we need innovation and imagination, but the imagination can be trained. It used to be called the ars rhetorica, the rhetorical arts of training people's ability to think, count, sing, imagine, paint. The imagination, which is the engineering of the social imaginary, can be trained. That's what the humanities are there for. So why are we shutting down literature departments across Western European universities? Why are we shutting down the classics? Why are we closing down art history? Why are we shutting down the very sources of inspiration for the making of a new imagination? What is cognitive capitalism up to when on the one hand it demands innovation, on the other hand it shuts down the very places where innovation historically has been produced? I think here are what I would call discursive battle lines that we really need to embrace. Critical posthumanities would require a new alliance across the board, but it also requires a culture of mutual respect between the life sciences and the soft, subtle sciences that are the humanities. The humanities are a branch of complexity theories, particularly in their posthumanity critical mode. But what I want to conclude with is really the notion of who is the we. Who is the we that is the subject of posthuman knowledge? And here I want to talk about the perspectivism that we get from understanding that, yes, we are in this together, but we really are not one and the same. We need to have differential material perspective, embodied and embedded. We need to look at the differences that separate us, not as fragments, not as forms of relativism, not as social problems, but as part of the reality of being situated. This is a new type of empiricism. Deleuze called it the empirical transcendental. It's specifically situated perspectives. And I would use affirmative ethics, that's another lecture, as the binding factor here, co-creating together sustainable systems where we can imagine differently our future, we engineer different types of social imaginary. A quick annotation here, the question of being in this together on a planetary scale has been at the core of postcolonial theory and postcolonial studies. And if there is one other area we need to bring into the discussion is the type of humanism that has been forged in race and postcolonial studies, starting from the painful, difficult discussion between Michel Foucault and Edward Sayid on the question of humanism. whereby, as a post-structuralist, Foucault takes Western humanism to task and says, really, you have lost all credibility as a concept after the Second World War. In his case, Auschwitz was the point of reference, but for Michel, the point of reference was Hiroshima and Nagasaki. These are the breaking point. And after these events, you cannot tell me, dear Mr. Vitruvius, that science and technology are the guarantees of the progress of humanity. In fact, says Michel Serres, after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we knew the science was the problem, not the solution to the problem. So for Foucault, as a Euro-positioned thinker, being critical of European humanism was the obvious thing to do, the ethical thing to do, was the political thing to do. Edward Sayid, yes, he critiques Eurocentrism, but he ends up actually defending humanism, saying we can't do without Shakespeare, we can't do without Mozart, we can't do without the great classics. And for a generation, they grew up with Beatles and Rolling Stones. That was quite a statement. But beyond this dispute, if you look at the non-Western roots of humanism, Jean-Paul Sartre's preface to Fanon, Les Damnés de la Terre, when Sartre says humanism has a brilliant future, not in Europe, not in the West, where it's died. The future of humanism will be in Asia, in Africa, elsewhere in the world, continents that have some credibility when they can talk about a we that is actually humanistically bound and caring. And you will find the same discourse in Mandela's appeal to African humanism, Ubuntu, which for him goes completely together with Marxist, socialist humanism. Mandela will call himself a socialist, communist, humanist to the end of his life. Paul Gilroy picks up this legacy today when he talks about planetary humanism, but not European humanism, coming from the other traditions. And if you compare this tradition, for instance, to Martha Nussbaum's model of liberal humanism, you will see the enormous difference. Nussbaum very much Eurocentered and very Vitruvian, and people like Gilroy, Fanon, Aimé Césaire, looking at different traditions here, from Islam to African to Buddhist humanisms. These are traditions that we may want to consider learning from, but that takes humility, and that takes a more sort of ecumenical approach than many of us are actually ready for. So how do we compose a we that would be not only the obvious emanation of the epistemic accelerationism of cognitive advanced capitalism, but a situated, differential, planetary posthumanism? The field is working very, very fast on this, and you will be very happy to know that we do have already the new alliances, and that in these alliances, indigenous, environmental, and digital humanisms, post-colonial green, also known as decolonial digital media, transnational environmental literary studies, indigenous knowledges and epistemologies are already absolutely available as degree courses, as websites, as publications. They are discursive formations that are absolutely up and running. And you will find that the decolonial, very much inspired by Mignolo, and you will find indigenous epistemologies coming up almost as a critique of classical postcolonial studies. First Nation people in British Columbia and Australia are the groups that I work with. People who are close to the earth, saying to the Anthropocene obsessed people of the posthumanities. Also, you're worried about extinction. Maybe you want to come and talk to us a little bit about extinction. Maybe we have something to teach you about extinction, given that we have been persecuted by colonial powers for 250 years. Maybe we are the specialists of survivals. Very interesting conversation. University of Victoria in Canada, where the law school is working on recreating a legal code that would give First Nation people a legal voice. It's not a question of going back. There's nothing to go back to. There's only colonial devastation. It's regeneration. It's a synthetic biology of human rights, being done with an acumen, with a brilliance, with a generosity that leaves you absolutely staggered. Same stories in Australia. Aboriginal studies chairs coming in saying, you worried about the earth? Talk to me. We are the first earth people. Extraordinary conversation, painful, but very interesting because they are beyond identity politics. They are not about the rights of, they are about the rights, but it's the rights of the end of the land. It's giving rivers and waters a legal presence and respecting the cosmologies that go with it. In my reading of these new maps that are coming up, I noticed that even within the new planetary differential humanities, as I call them, these new developments, there were still missing people. Some categories are not present. Non-nationally indexed humanities are not present. Feminist and queer humanities, I haven't found any programs on that. Black humanities only as a metaphor. Migrant diasporic humanities, nobody's investing in that. I owe the next one to Richard Rorty. Poor or trailer park humanities, no programs on that. Decolonial, yes, a little. A child humanities, a bit in child studies, but not much. Otherwise able or disabled humanities, not really. So people are still missing. We are still having empirically missing people, but the empirically missing people are always a bit the same. The axes of exclusion are always the same. What interests me is the virtual missing people, the alliances that would allow us to bring into the conversation Black humanities, poor humanities, disabled humanities. In other words, if you look at back to the discussion of how cognitive capitalism is affecting the production of posthuman knowledges, some subjects of knowledge are being selected out. And it's part of this kind of very new, the way in which contemporary discursive power is being distributed. And I would say if we want the humanities to be a representative we, these missing people need to be brought back through virtual alliances that would allow them to be part of the conversation about the knowledge that we are producing today. Instead of this differential planetary humanities, what worries me as the dominant discourse today is what I call corporate neo-humanism or pan-humanism. And I'm using here old slides from the 1990s. There are new ones coming today, but this is the famous Benetton campaign in the time of Toscanos, where you have humanity recomposed under the cover, literally, of consumerism. The blonde chick with her Aryan looks, the strange sort of androgynous African, and in the middle, with the fist raised in case you hadn't noticed, the future is in Asia. Message, one humanity, one race, the human race. I am very worried about the return of corporate humanism and United Nations-backed pan-humanism. It reintroduces a we that is too unified, too unitary, a we that brings us back to defacing, deleting the power differentials. What we need is instead is embodied, embedded, relational affective cartographies of the new power relations that are emerging from the current geopolitical, post-anthropocentric world and order. It is a case that we are situated between the fourth industrial revolution and the sixth extinction. Class, race, gender, sexual orientation, age, able-bodiedness remain significant markers of human normality. They actually police access to something that we can call humanity. And yet, we are in this together. Whether you look at the Anthropocene or the benefits of our incredible scientific revolution, we cannot afford to be cynical and we cannot afford to be separatist. We are in this together. And the way to postulate that we is a planetary posthumanist differential becoming. The world is not one. We are not one, but that does not mean that the only options that we have are hostility, animosity, or indifference. Out of these materially situated differences can come new subjects of posthuman knowledge, under the cover of diversity, under the cover of differential perspectives, and under the cover that, yes, we are in this together, and yes, we care, but we is not one. And I think in this discussion, somewhere along the line, the humanities, post-human, proto-human, transhuman, have a crucial role to play. And as what we've always been, the discourses that speak truth to power, the engineers of the imagination, and somewhere along the line, the place where our profound love for the world still manifests itself through the contradiction, the paradoxes, the euphoria, and the fears that mark this incredible era that we, universities, have contributed to bring about. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this very stimulating talk. The floor is now open for questions, so if you want to ask any question, just raise your hand and we'll pass the microphone. I have two of them, so hopefully it's going to be quite easy to give the floor to it.
And all the languages that you can manage, it's fine.
Yeah, and if you, well, no, you can introduce yourself if you want, or remain anonymous.
We want a DNA sample or nothing.
Hello, thank you very much for this conference. It was really interesting. I have a little question. It is about, you didn't talk about psychoanalysis, and I would be really interested if you saw something about that, death psychoanalysis and IT, for example. Are they trying to create links? It's just a simple question. I'm just curious.
Does anybody want to add anything to this question coming in on the psychoanalysis? For my generation of philosophy students, psychoanalysis was a compulsory point of reference. At the Sorbonne in those days, you couldn't not do it. I think I did my 7 years dutifully 3 times a week. It was part of what we did. The discourse of the unconscious had the dignity of a subject of knowledge, not only because of Lacan, but because of a number of premises in those days. I am afraid that the situation has evolved rather negatively since, at least in the English-speaking world, where there has been, as Foucault predicted, a medicalization of mental health. I mean, even the British Royal and Prince Harry is talking about mental health, but which it basically means Ritalin and Prozac and psychopharmaceutics that have pretty much taken center stage. My students know more about psychopharmaceutics than they know about the discourse of the unconscious. And I think it would be interesting to study what has happened there and why that particular type of attention to inner contradictions has been faded out, but also why the unconscious as a transgenerational mode of relation has been left out. And I always describe the unconscious to my students as a transhistorical memory of things that may or may not have happened to you, but which you forgot to forget. And it's a mode of relation. And you forgot to forget things that, of course, you remember them, you are repeating them, but it's a peculiar type of memory. And I think it would be really helpful if we could bring it back. It has lost cultural, I think, status for, I think, the reasons to do with cognitive capitalism. How we can bring it back in, apart from the pathologies, which are always there as a support. I think it works extremely well in the discussion with indigenous communities about dreams. I think that the dream world is a connector if you're trying to create alliances across the board. I think dreaming is a very interesting mode of connection. It was Freud's question, what kind of knowledge do you produce when you're not even thinking? What kind of knowledge? It was Lacan's question, actually. And I think that's one level where in anthropology we can still do it, and I think what people call ethno-psychoanalysis is very alive. I haven't seen much of it in the digital humanities. What is very strong in the digital humanities is phenomenology. The whole phenomenological tradition, very present, because a lot of the digital humanities are about perception, sensation, and memory. If you look at the Duke school, Mark Hansen is neo-phenomenology. But the unconscious, I think, is a big question. And here, much as I love Deleuze and Guattari, and I think that their reading of capitalism is incredibly sharp, I think that their critique of psychoanalysis has backfired in the sense that my students say, oh, Deleuze says psychoanalysis is rubbish, so I don't have to read it. No, just a moment. Deleuze and Guattari critique something that they know very well. So do not reject something that you don't even know. Read some of it, and then if you have problems, critique it. And I think the kind of 19th century thermodynamics vision of desire of psychoanalysis is what is aged. It's what does not speak to our era. I think that the entropic nature of desire as lack does not fit in with the type of energy produced by cognitive capitalism. And here, when Deleuze and Guattari talk about the unconscious as a production, as a collective production, I think that they are hitting something that resonates a lot more. But again, Guattari was Lacan's darling boy, favorite student, and in analysis. So I think that there is a reconnection to be made here. What do posthuman subjects dream of? And I even have that sentence in my posthuman book. Maybe they do dream of electric sheep. Maybe they dream of microchip, but they do dream. And I think we need to reconnect to the discourse, I think. In the archaeology of knowledge, it has been lost. It's so bright that I can't see a thing. On peut aussi le faire en français tranquillement, c'est pas un problème si vous préférez.
Thank you so much. I just arrived in ULB and working for a Center for East Asian Studies.
East.
So the area that you mentioned is very dynamic and generating a lot of knowledge, but doesn't quite belong to a classical framework of universities. So I have two questions related to your presentation. One of them, just as far as my understanding goes, it seems that you're proposing to revise the notion of the human by saying that posthumanism. Doesn't that actually affect the whole another set of terminologies like technology? It seems like technology doesn't mean the same way as we would use in relation to human as a means to achieve certain ends. It seems the technology would have to mean something entirely different. The second question is a practical question in the sense that how can we maintain the current mode of universities while promoting posthumanism?
Do we have $1 million question.
Do we have to overhaul the entire framework that we have, or you still think the classical framework can serve as a kind of jumping board?
Thank you so much. This is the kind of question that I have to start answering by saying, who is we? Where do we position ourselves to start dealing with the complexity of your question. If we just look at the structure of contemporary university, something like La Maison des Sciences Humaines, 3-year-old, is a typical example of how the universities are fighting back, trying to actually both reach out to society, but also acknowledge that the production of knowledge is much bigger than the university itself can deal with. It goes together with media culture, musical culture, and hacking culture, and the drug culture, never talked about, but absolutely fundamental. A whole type of sexuality running on the net that the people call porn, but it's more complicated than that. So it's multi-layered sort of levels of productions of knowledge. And I've seen emanations like this. Utrecht has an institute for global studies, and we have an institute for sustainability. And UCL, where I'm a visiting professor, has a center for global prosperity. All of these date back to less than 5 years. And you can go through all the great universities in the Western world, and you will find these emanations that are interdisciplinary, but in fact they're transdisciplinary, they're cutting across. And this is where it's not, for the moment, maybe not the case in Bruxelles, but it will come. Certainly UCL and in Utrecht, these are the places where the research money is going. Most of the teaching is done in the old faculties, as I call them. The research money goes to the environmental, the digital thing. It will come for the Maison des Sciences Humaines as well, I'm pretty sure. The possibilities are there. So the institutional answer is quite clear, experimenting with these things. And this is creating some interesting paradoxes. Like Chakrabarty says it himself, then where do we put gender studies and postcolonial studies? How anthropocentric is gender studies? And it's about, LGBTs and women. Well, that's humans. Eco-criticism, okay, some, but Donna Haraway, okay, she's always the one that we quote out of despair, but it's profoundly anthropocentric. Postcolonial studies, postcolonial green, but that's 80 years ago. It's all very recent. So critical theory, the radical epistemologies from the 1970s are not left untouched by this. They are just as much in trouble as English literature and the other ones. There's some revision to be done here. So in this respect, if I can take the broader sense of your question, I do think that there is a reorganization of knowledge that is transversal. And I think that the posthuman convergence, posthumanism is easy, post-anthropocentrism is not. Thinking the connection to the geo, the zoe, the techno, that is what the difficulty is. Will require a great deal of imagination. But in what I presented here today, I did what my teachers also taught me to do. I went back to the future. I mean, Spinoza was doing it. So why did we prefer Descartes to Spinoza? Well, I have a few hypotheses as to why we did that. Why does dualism rule? Well, it runs the world, doesn't it? It's the perfect ideology for a budding industrial society and a budding imperial colonial society, us and them. It's divide and conquer. Very interesting work on critique of colonialism, empire, reason, and humanism. And sword in one hand, Bible in the other, we bring civilization to the barbarians. Did we not do that? Or we just are amnesiac? Can we keep that in mind while we're also saying that we are an incredible culture, that we have done amazing things, and we've also done some pretty awful things? Can it be and, or do we have to continue with either or? And I think this and, which is Deleuze's notion of nomadic, rhizomic, relational thing, I think is fundamental. And we have to grow out of the negative passions of fear and guilt. We have to stop being warriors of European humanism. Humanism is always a pretext to fight wars. Sort of relational ontologies. We can go back to the pragmatists. As I repeat, Dewey's and James, you've got Isabel Stenger's here. She's a genius. She's been doing Whitehead for years. She's shown ways of doing things. So there are multiple ways in which this can be done, but we have to embrace the challenge and progress, not regress and protect our boundaries. Go with it and make this generative leap towards the critical posthumanities. We can do it with a song, literally. But who is the we who would carry the project? We need a people. We need an assemblage. We need a constituency. And I think that would be the becoming of the humanities today. I think Maison des Sciences Humaines it's the composition of a people. It's the composition of a community. It seems to me, dear Vincent.
All right, we have time for one more question because we have machines problem, like they have batteries, so after 2 hours, like they just stop filming. And we still need to hear the musical performance, so if somebody has one last question, we'll be very happy to take it. And of course, the idea is to keep talking around the drinks. That there won't be gin, but it will be tonic. And a mix of...
Not the same.
Perhaps you'll find your next critical
No, this is Brussels,
cocktail.
we shall have our beer. We
So-
can always out-drink the machines. Specificity.
All right, so thank you very much. I think we can give a last round of applause for... So to keep with the schedule, we'll move on with 20 minutes performance. This is the second part of our evening. Perhaps Martin, you can already take the mic because you have one or two technical issues to deal with while I'm talking. So the second part of the evening, as you know, is based on the idea, and we've talked about it just moments ago, the idea that machines would be turning slowly into proto-humans, that would be their destiny would be to replace human in every field imaginable, including literature, art, and music. So that's the basic idea of this performance. Our question is, are they really? I mean, we read a lot about it, but where do we really stand? What are the artificial intelligences of today really capable of doing now? What can a musician, because it's not the either or, it's also and, what can a musician learn from his or her interaction with an artificial intelligence? How do we, as an audience, have to listen to things differently, perhaps? Because you will see, perhaps it's not that easy to listen to interaction between an artificial intelligence and all its imperfections and a jazz player. So to tackle all this issue without too much theory, but with a lot of practice, we asked Martin Daniel to join us. Martin Daniel is a trained jazz pianist. He has been playing countless types of bands, with countless types of keyboards, and in countless types of venues around Belgium and Europe. He's a founding member of the Glue, that he describes as an electro drum and bass trance live band. I have no idea what it means, but perhaps we'll talk about that around a drink. And the Glue will be playing at the Festival de Liberté, the Vrijheid Festival. So if you want to go listen to them at the end of the month, go. I highly recommend it. So this is for Martin. And the other performer of tonight is AI Duet. But we have to check if she's already online. Is she? Oh, I think she's coming. It's detected, or she's detected. I had trouble defining he or who. In French, we don't have the neutral, so it's quite easier.
Hi, I'm Yotam. This is an experiment called AI Duet. It uses machine learning to let you play a duet with the computer. Making music using code isn't a new thing at all, but machine learning gives us a different way to go about it. If I was trying to make AI Duet with more traditional programming, I'd have to write out lots of rules, like if someone plays a C, maybe respond by going up to a G. Or if someone plays 3 ascending notes, then maybe go back down. I'd basically be creating this map to tell the computer how to make these decisions, but there are just too many note and timing combinations to map it all by hand. This experiment approaches the problem differently, using machine learning, specifically neural networks. We played the computer tons of examples of melodies. Over time, it learns these fuzzy relationships between notes and timings and builds its own map based on the examples it's given. So in this experiment, you play a few notes. They go to the neural net, which basically decides, based on those notes and all the examples it's been given, some possible responses.
So now you've met Martin, you've met AI Duet, and now I'll leave the floor to Martin. I think you want to say a few words in French and you want me to translate them into English, am I right?
Bonsoir à tous. Donc, merci beaucoup Vincent de m'avoir invité. Donc, effectivement, moi je suis pianiste. Ça fait une quinzaine d'années que je joue avec toutes sortes de gens et qu'on fait toutes sortes de musique, et beaucoup de musique improvisée.
So Martin's been playing for a long time with a lot of different people, and he's mainly doing improvised music.
Donc, aujourd'hui, Vincent m'a demandé quelque chose d'un peu particulier, c'est de jouer avec AI Duet. Donc, cette espèce d'intelligence artificielle qui est censée répondre à ce qu'on lui propose musicalement.
So I asked him to interact with AI Duet, obviously.
Et donc, déjà, il faut voir qu'est-ce que ça veut dire improviser avec des gens. Donc, principalement, il faut savoir dans quel contexte on est, et donc pouvoir proposer des choses cohérentes. Déjà, il faut savoir dans quel contexte rythmique on est, donc la subdivision du temps.
So the first thing you have to do when you improvise with somebody, be it a machine or a human, you have to know the global context. And in that context, you first need rhythm, so the division of time.
Le style, le genre de musique que c'est, évidemment, ça va influer. Et puis, la tonalité. Donc, dans notre musique, il y a toujours une tonique qui est la note centrale autour de laquelle toutes les autres vont s'organiser selon une hiérarchie.
And the two other things you need to know when you improvise is the style you are playing with, the global style you're using, and the tonality you're in, because in our, let's say, Western classical music, everything is based on the one note, the tonal note, around which everything is organized.
Donc, j'ai passé pas mal de temps à jouer avec cette chose, et j'ai identifié différents types de jeux qui génèrent des réponses différentes. Donc, il va y avoir, je vais vous jouer 5 phases. D'abord, je vais jouer tout seul pour que vous puissiez vous rendre compte de ce que ça donne sans les réponses de la machine. Donc, la première phase, ça va être très simple, très minimal, peu de notes, peu d'informations.
So Martin identified a number of different ways of playing with the artificial intelligence. They interacted for a few months, actually. They know each other right now. And so he identified different types of styles or ways of playing. And the first one that you will be doing is, did you say it already? Or?
Ouais.
Okay, so it's the first one is a very simple one. He's going to start playing alone, and he's going to be playing a really simple music just to see how the intelligence responds.
La deuxième phase sera centrée autour d'un ostinato, donc une ligne de basse répétitive, toujours pas trop d'informations.
Second phase, an ostinato, so a bass that is repeating itself with not too much information.
En troisième phase, je vais jouer dans un style plus moderne, plus du jazz des années 60, donc quelque chose de plus chargé.
Third phase will be more like 60s jazz, more notes and heavier content.
En quatrième phase, je vais vous jouer deux thèmes de jazz très classiques.
The fourth phase will be like 2 jazz standards, that classic one that you probably know.
Et enfin, on va terminer par une cinquième phase beaucoup plus éclatée, atonale, très moderne, et on va voir comment ça réagit.
And the last phase will be more modern music, really widespread notes, and we will see how the artificial intelligence will react.
Donc à l'écran, vous verrez tout ce que je fais en bleu, normalement. Voilà. Et puis on verra plus tard les interactions de la machine en orange, ce qui facilitera la compréhension.
All right, so when he plays, it's in blue, and when the artificial intelligence will respond, because she's not there yet, it will be in orange. All right. So Martin will first start to play everything, the 5 phases, alone, and afterwards you will play the same phases but with the machine, so that you will be able to see the difference.
c'est la 4e phase. Et maintenant, on va voir comment ça se passe avec la machine. Est-ce que c'est mieux ou est-ce que c'est moins bien ? La voilà. Donc c'est reparti pour la phase 1. Alors le problème, c'est que là, on est dans le son de la machine. Et donc, évidemment, c'est beaucoup moins bien que le son de cette chose-là. Donc, la machine n'est pas sensible à la pédale, mais surtout pas sensible à la vélocité, donc à la force à laquelle on appuie les touches. ce qui est un peu perturbant. Et en plus de ça, il y a un petit retard. Donc, moi, je dois jouer avec mon casque pour entendre parce que sinon, c'est difficile.
So the machine is not actually sensitive to the velocity, which means the strength with which you hit the keys, and it's not either working with. Sorry, I stole that from you. With the pedal, and the sound is not as good as it is with the keyboard because it's generated by the software. So you will see that the sound in itself is not as beautiful as it is with the actual keyboard.
Donc, deuxième phase, donc une ligne de basse qui va rester. Troisième phase, quelque chose de plus rempli. Quatrième phase. Cinquième phase. Voilà. Donc, voilà, il y a des moments mieux que d'autres. Il y a des moments où on se demande un peu. Mais globalement, c'est intéressant. On sent, enfin, moi j'ai passé pas mal de temps dessus. Je sens qu'il y a eu du chemin, qu'il y a beaucoup de boulot et qu'il y a un téléphone qui fait du bruit.
So yeah, there are different types of things that are working and things that are not working. But overall, there is something interesting because he's been playing with it, her, or him for a long time.
On sent que c'est ni du hasard, ni de l'imitation. On sent qu'il y a vraiment le but, c'est le but, c'est qu'il y ait une interaction intéressante et c'est que le programme rajoute des choses qui sont créatives et qui sont plus ou moins cohérentes avec le reste.
So it's not random. Something is definitely happening. It's not randomly come back. But I forgot what you were saying. But
qu'il essaye de répondre de manière créative.
They try to respond in a creative manner. It's not just repeating what's been done before.
Alors il y a des contextes dans lesquels ça fonctionne mieux que d'autres. Évidemment, dès qu'il y a beaucoup de mouvements au niveau de l'harmonie, ça devient compliqué.
There are contexts where it works better than other. When there is a lot of movements in the harmony, it's really complicated.
Plus il y a de contraintes rythmiques et harmoniques, et plus le programme a du mal, et plus on est dans une musique qui permet plus de liberté, et plus ça fonctionne en fait. Mieux ça fonctionne.
The more we are in a context where there's a lot of liberty in the music and less constraint, the better it works actually.
Et donc parfois ça ne marche pas. Pourtant pour un même jeu, et puis parfois en jouant avec cette petite chose, il y a des moments de grâce qui sont comparables à ceux qu'on peut trouver en jouant avec des vraies personnes.
Sometimes it doesn't work at all, but sometimes you have some graceful moments that are actually comparable to what you can have with actual human beings.
Donc voilà, on sent qu'il y a beaucoup à faire dans ce domaine-là et qu'ils le font. Maintenant, ça prendra certainement beaucoup de temps avant de pouvoir faire un groupe avec que des AI Duet. Mais c'est très intéressant.
So there's a lot of way forward. We are still at the infancy of the technology, but and there is still we'll need time before having a group made exclusively of AI duets. But it's interesting and it's coming.
Voilà, merci beaucoup pour votre patience et votre compréhension.
If somebody has one quick question that you can address to Martin, and then can perhaps go to have a drink. If I go there, I should have some light to see if somebody's got a question. Yes? Ooh, that was tough. Yes, there's a question there. Can you please talk in the mic because you're recording?
Tu as joué donc Humanities, qui est un standard de jazz. Tu l'as joué souvent avec, je ne sais plus comment elle s'appelle, merci. Donc tu l'as joué souvent. Est-ce que tu as vu une différence entre la première... Est-ce que la machine finalement comprend... J'ai pas l'impression moi qu'elle comprend vraiment où va la chanson. Tu vois ce que je veux dire? Est-ce qu'à force elle la comprend de mieux en mieux? Genre la fin, elle comprend jamais quand c'est la fin par exemple. Enfin, or tu l'as joué très souvent avec elle, non?
So quickly, the question is: you played Autumn Leaves a lot with other intelligent individuals, and it still doesn't understand it. How dumb is it? That's the question.
Donc je pense que c'est au cours d'une seule session qu'elle apprend. Si on redémarre le truc, je pense que ça revient à zéro. Et donc effectivement, elle peut pas savoir le début et la fin. Et en plus, elle veut avoir le dernier mot. Mais en plus de ça, elle ne peut pas s'adapter à un rythme harmonique. Donc c'est-à-dire que dans Autumn Leaves, il y a une série d'accords qui évoluent, qui forment un cycle. Et elle sait pas où donc elle répond dans le contexte de l'accord d'il y a une ou deux mesures. Et donc c'est chaque fois, ça colle pas bien, quoi. Elle peut pas anticiper comme un musicien pourrait le faire. À un moment qu'on comprend un cycle, et du coup on va l'anticiper pour pouvoir jouer dessus. Mais ça marche pas comme ça.
Very quickly, you were saying in this the fact that the machine doesn't have the ability to anticipate, but that there is creative reaction. Just by listening to it, I felt that there was very much more of a reaction rather than an initiation, a musical initiation in her response. So I wondered if you could comment on that.
Yeah,
it feels like she's following a lot more than she's leading.
Yes, no, I don't think they did that to lead anything. I think they say a piano that responds to you. So it's only response, and you have to launch it, because if it was different, it would be playing right now, and now it's waiting until someone launch it. Like, so it's not the thing. They did not that to try to do a composer, but to try to do an improviser, someone with whom you can play with. But it's not a composing machine.
Can I just add one last question? How well did you think they followed?
What?
Dans quelle mesure est-ce que vous trouvez que la machine a vraiment suivi ce que vous avez fait? Parce que j'ai l'impression qu'elle a suivi de manière assez quand même limitée, contrainte. Elle n'est pas allée loin en dehors du contexte ou du cadre de lequel vous avez joué.
Non. Donc en fait, effectivement, je crois que un des critères, c'est de rester proche de ce qu'on lui a joué, dans une espèce d'imitation. Par exemple, si on joue dans un certain registre du piano, dans une zone précise, elle va avoir tendance à suivre et à jouer dans le même registre. Ce qu'on ne va pas faire si on joue avec quelqu'un, on va évidemment essayer de trouver chacun son registre. Donc ça, c'est très différent. Pareil au niveau du tempo, si on joue des notes longues, elle va plutôt imiter ça. Si on joue des choses très rapides et nerveuses, elle va plutôt imiter ça. J'ai l'impression qu'elle essaye de rester dans la même tonalité, mais ça marche pas encore bien. Elle sort encore des... Mais je sens vraiment qu'il y a quelque chose qui tente de suivre. Quand on joue de manière très libre et en improvisant dans plein de styles, je sens vraiment que le machin essaye de suivre. Mais c'est pas encore.
Quelle est votre prévision? Est-ce qu'elle fera mieux que nous dans le futur?
Ouais, ben ça dépend déjà du style de musique. Après, voilà, dans la musique actuelle, il y a déjà une énorme implication des machines, et pas seulement en termes d'outils, mais aussi de plus en plus pour apporter quelque chose de créatif. Donc il y a des tas de choses qui génèrent de la musique, et ça c'est un peu le même but, mais maintenant il y a tellement de manières de jouer et de styles. Je pense que ça va prendre vraiment du temps. Mais ça dépend pour jouer quoi. Par exemple, si pour jouer du classique contemporain atonal, là, on y est presque. Pour jouer des choses plus conséquentes, avec plus de mouvements harmoniques, ça va être difficile. Maintenant, je pense qu'il y aurait des versions de ça dans lesquelles on pourrait rentrer une grille d'accords, ou éventuellement rentrer un tempo ou une trame. Et donc, à mon avis, il va y avoir bientôt des versions plus riches, où on peut beaucoup plus paramétrer des choses et donc lui permettre de mieux suivre. Mais là, c'est pas encore...
All right, thank you very much, and thank you, Martin. Thank you.